In 2012, Sandra Melgar and her husband, Jaime Melgar, were celebrating their 32nd wedding anniversary at their home in Houston, Texas. The next morning, Jaime was found stabbed and beaten to death, and Sandra was discovered tied up in a closet. During the investigation, the police suspected Sandra of staging a home invasion to cover up her involvement in her husband's murder. However, Sandra always maintained her innocence, and despite the violent nature of Jaime's death, Sandra did not have any visible wounds or marks indicative of a physical altercation. This aspect of the case added complexity, fueling debates about Sandra's involvement and the circumstances surrounding the crime. Jim's journey began in Guatemala, but at the age of 3, his family made the life-changing move to the United States. They chose to settle in the vibrant city of Houston, Texas, where Sandra and her family were already living. Fate brought Jim and Sandra together at Lamar High School in 1978, sparking a high school romance that blossomed into something deeper. In 1980, they sealed their love with marriage. Jim, a skilled computer programmer, and Sandra, the proud owner of a medical billing and coding business, created a life filled with promise. Their joy expanded with the arrival of their daughter, Elizabeth, who affectionately considered her parents as her best friends. The Melgar family thrived on shared adventures, exploring the wonders that life had to offer. Sandra faced significant health challenges, including conditions like lupus and epilepsy, along with undergoing a hip replacement. These health issues took a toll on her well-being, making her increasingly reliant on the support of her husband, Jim. The situation intensified as Sandra began experiencing violent seizures, disrupting her daily life and deepening her dependence on Jim for care and assistance. On December 23, 2012, a sense of unease gripped Jim's neighbor when they noticed his garage door, typically closed, standing open. Jim's brother, Herman, arrived with his family at 4:30 p.m. for a visit. Knocking on the door yielded silence, and with the garage door was open and both Jim and Sandra's car were parked, Herman entered the house through the garage. The unusual stillness heightened his worry, but then he heard Sandra's cries for help emanating from upstairs, specifically from their bedroom. Upon rushing upstairs to the bedroom, Herman discovered Sandra in the bathroom, just opposite the jacuzzi. In front of the walk-in closet door was a chair that was propped up under the doorknob that needed to move in order to open the door. She was in the walk-in closet, bound so tightly that they had to be cut to free her. The distressing scene revealed the severity of the situation. Sandra, bound and helpless, had endured the ordeal in such a confined space that she was forced to defecate and urinate in the same location. As soon as Sandra was freed, she searched for Jim. In their bedroom, about 30 feet from where Sandra was discovered, lay Jim's lifeless body, bearing severe injuries. The scene was heartbreaking. Subsequent forensic analysis revealed the extent of the brutality. Jim had suffered over 50 injuries, with more than 30 being stab wounds, and numerous others were injuries to his skull. Sandra, upon being freed, had no recollection of the events that transpired, leaving investigators puzzled about the circumstances surrounding her binding and Jim's tragic death. What struck them as odd was the absence of severe ligature marks on someone who had been bound for approximately 15 hours. Knife that was inside the jacuzzi was determined to be the murder weapon. Initially, the scene seemed to suggest a burglary gone wrong, but police had other suspicion on their mind. Sandra shared with officers that on the evening of December 22nd, she and Jim returned home after celebrating their 32nd wedding anniversary at their favorite Mexican restaurant. The couple's plan for the night was to unwind together in the jacuzzi, enjoying each other's company while indulging in snacks. However, soon they heard their small dogs barking.
And did you immediately get into the jacuzzi at that time when you got home?
We made drinks and went straight to the jacuzzi. He got out once to go get ice and then came back and then said he was going to move the dogs because they were barking too much. He got out and said he was moving the dogs to the office because when they're too loud, we don't want the neighbors to complain. It was taking a while, so I got out and was going to get dressed for a change in my closet. And I went in there and I started to change. And that's all I remember until I woke up.
Sandra's recollection of the night took a dark turn as she remembered going to the closet to change. But beyond that moment, her memory faded. She shared that she either blacked out or was possibly struck down by someone. Upon regaining consciousness, she found herself in a disorienting situation, unsure of how much time had passed. Her uncertainty about whether she had experienced a seizure and blacked out again.
Appears that she may have been hit over the head with something. Investigators haven't released information on any possible suspects. They took Sandra Melgar to homicide headquarters to interview her.
Andy, thank you, sir. Relatives got to the Melgar house yesterday. They said they noticed that the garage door was open. Investigators haven't said anything yet about any possible signs of forced entry or about whether the couple's home had possibly been ransacked or if anything was missing.
The police had strong suspicions about Sandra's involvement, fueled by her inability to provide a coherent statement about the events of that night. The perplexing question of why, if an intruder was involved, they would bind Sandra while brutally attacking her husband added to the suspicions.
We weren't cold-blooded killers that just on the street that would just kill somebody for nothing. And sometimes we murders that they're in an argument and something happens. Okay, there's two different types of people. Because if you're arguing with somebody and you lose it, your temper and an argument happens.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened. And I think I'm going to stop talking now because I think I'm going to need a lawyer because I know how this works. I hurt all over and my head hurts.
How often do you have seizures like that?
And I'm not able to drive anymore.
How frequent?
Just once a month, maybe.
When was the last time that you had one of those before today?
About a month ago.
The investigators determined that the house was staged as burglary, as everything was neatly taken out and no such valuables were taken. Investigators demonstrated a crucial aspect, emphasizing that it is relatively easier for an individual to tie themselves up and strategically propped up the chain under the doorknob. Convinced of Sandra's potential involvement, investigators began building a case based on the theory that she was responsible for the tragic events. Furthermore, her refusal to undergo a polygraph test heightened more suspicions surrounding her involvement in the case.
What's your explanation, though? What's your excuse for not taking one? It's not holding water, Sandra. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not. You know, I'm not. I'm just being upfront and honest with you, and that's my job to do that.
I just don't want to take it and then it's used against me.
That's not possible.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Despite their suspicions, investigators' request to file a murder charge against Sandra Melgar was disapproved by the district attorney's office due to lack of evidence. After a year and a half, in summer 2014, the murder charges against Sandra Melgar was approved, leading to her arrest.
What a development here. A woman who once claimed to be the victim of a home invasion that ended up killing her husband is now charged with his murder. You may remember this story. Christmas Eve of 2012, Sandra Melgar claimed somebody broke into her Northwest Harris County home, tied her up in the closet, and murdered her husband. Well, now authorities say that was all an elaborate lie.
Ms. Melgar says that they were in the bathroom together, her and her husband, at approximately 1 a.m. this morning, and at some time she blacked out, and next thing she remembers is waking up in the closet tied up.
I mean, it was so weird that what happened and how it happened, didn't seem like we heard anything like anything had been stolen or anything like that.
Now curious neighbors want to know what information led investigators to charge Mrs. Melgar and why it took so long. They have, after all, been unnerved for over a year, thinking a home invasion on their street was the work of ruthless thieves.
It's a relief to know that it's not a random, it's not a home invasion.
Sandra Melgar's defense strategy involved bringing in an expert, Billy Belk, a former Houston homicide detective with 22 years of experience who had worked on hundreds of cases. The defense's expert, a former Houston homicide detective, conducted a detailed analysis of the crime scene. He criticized the investigation, pointing out biases and shortcomings. Notably, Herman Melgar's family, the initial discoverers of the crime scene, was never thoroughly questioned, which is a standard investigative practices. Despite Sandra's daughter providing crucial information about potentially stolen items, including a missing TV and a bag found in the garage containing an Xbox and jewelry, the police reportedly ignored these details during their investigation. Unknown DNA from both a woman and a man was discovered on the door handles of the Melgar's residence. Notably, these DNA profiles did not match anyone from the Melgar family. Additionally, an unknown woman's DNA was identified on the bag found by Sandra's daughter in the garage. Weeks after the incident, Sandra started to piece together fragments of her memory. She recalled encountering a young Hispanic woman during the attack who was conversing with another individual responsible for tying her up. There was a safe in the closet whose handle was all bloody. Investigators did not bother to process the safe handle to find the DNA and the scarf used to tie Sandra, containing unknown male DNA. Unfortunately, investigators failed to process these crucial pieces of evidence, raising questions about the thoroughness of the police inquiry. This oversight suggested a premature conclusion regarding Sandra's guilt rather than a comprehensive effort to explore all available leads. A reporter observed a suspicious individual near the crime scene outside the Melgar residence shortly after the incident. The man, later identified as Chad Ryan Sullivan, claimed to live in the vicinity but exhibited peculiar behavior, raising concerns. Upon checking his name in the police system, it was discovered that Sullivan had a criminal record, including theft and assault. Astonishingly, he had been released from jail just 2 days before Jim Melgar's tragic murder. The police were informed about Chad Ryan Sullivan's suspicious background, prompting detectives to visit his residence. However, they found he was not present during their initial visits. In a final attempt to contact him, detectives left their business card under his front door. This would be the last effort made by authorities to reach him. The lack of substantial investigation into other potential leads raises questions about the thoroughness of the police's efforts. The prosecutor argued that Sandy must have been the murderer because there were allegedly no signs of forced entry and incorrectly stated that no items were missing from the house. During the trial, the prosecution put forth the idea that Sandy was unhappy in her marriage. No witnesses were found to testify that the Melgars had any marital difficulties. Combined with the testimony of a blood pattern analyst who dubiously stated the crime scene was not consistent with a home invasion, the prosecution convinced the jury Sandy was guilty of an almost impossible crime. She was sentenced to 27 years in prison. In 2018, renowned defense attorney Kathleen Zellner took on Sandra's case as she believed in her innocence. Zellner, known for her track record in securing exonerations for 19 wrongfully convicted individuals. Sandra's case has been taken over by the Innocence Project of Texas, an organization dedicated to investigating and overturning wrongful convictions. Throughout this process, Sandra has steadfastly maintained her innocence, and with the support of such advocacy groups, the quest for justice continues.